Now, our next speaker is an activist, a writer, a founder and national officer of Stop the War Coalition, as well as the People's Assembly Against Austerity. He's been a key figure on the left for many years, and he's also a close comrade of Jeremy Corbyn. Please welcome John Rees.
I just want to say, before I begin, a word to the police spies in the audience. We're going to be talking about you, not to you. So if you'd like to leave now, that would be well, actually, you don't have to leave. Just give generously to the collection at the end. And although, I'm joking about that, it's not a joke in a way. Andrew Murray, a friend of mine from Unite the Union, made the point recently in an article about the deep state and its role in this country. Jeremy was then asked about that on the Andrew Marr show. Andrew Marr said to him, well, what do you think about your comrade Andrew Murray's point about the deep state? I thought Jeremy made a very funny reply. He said, I hadn't noticed it. Which is kind of the point about the secret services. You aren't supposed to notice them, but it doesn't mean to say that they aren't there. And they will be there. If you've read the article in the Guardian this week, you'll know they're there in all the unions, in all the campaigns, in all the political organisations of the left. And they're there for a reason. They're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds on this. And the reason they're doing it is because no matter what they say in their press, they are frightened. They are worried about what ordinary people will do. They were worried about the CWU, so they had somebody there. They were worried about the Cherry Gross campaign and the Ricky Real campaign, and nearly all the unions and the organisations of the left and the Anti-Nazi League, and they must have been in about a dozen organisations that I've personally been a member of over the years. And that's because they care. When people stand up and fight back against racism, they notice and they want to make it ineffective if they can. When unions organise working people, they notice and they worry and they want to make it ineffective if they can. When the left organises and keeps socialist ideas alive, they care about that and they want to stop it and weaken it if they can. And we should draw strength from that. They are, after all, a very tiny group of people. Yes, certainly very wealthy. Yes, certainly very powerful. But in the end, a very tiny group of people, and we are millions of ordinary people on whom this society depends to function hour after hour, day after day, week after week. And they know that the moment we stop believing what they tell us and start organising for ourselves, they are in trouble, deep trouble. That's what they hate about the left and the unions. That's what they hate about the Corbyn movement. They hate the idea that ordinary people are going to take power into their own hands. That's what scares them. And to be honest, the secret services are the least of our worries and actually the least useful thing for them. I mean, to be honest, if these people were any good, they wouldn't have been penetrated by the Russian secret service for years. What really matters and what we should really be concerned about is that there is enormous power. The power, when a Corbyn government comes to power, to organise a run on the pound, to organise an investment strike, to use the power of the mass media to try and break support for a Corbyn government. That's the real power that we face. And you had something of a taste of how dirty and how nasty and how vile that can be over the summer. I mean, week after week, month after month of relentless personal, disgraceful attacks on Jeremy Corbyn over the question of anti-Semitism. And they always do that, by the way. They always attack the left on a supposedly left-wing issue. They attacked Arthur Scargill over democracy. They attacked Tony Benn, said, how can an aristocrat be a socialist? They always try and bend a left-wing argument for a right-wing purpose to pull down a left-wing leader. And we've got to think about those strategies and think about the struggles to come, because this isn't going to be a rehearsal. There isn't going to be a chance to do this once, get it wrong, and then do it again and get it right. There will only be a Corbyn government elected once. It will face an enormous attack from the state and from the capitalist class in this country, and there will be only one chance to defend it and get it right. So I want to talk about that long view. What's necessary to do that? Well, it's necessary, and I don't underestimate this for a moment, necessary, of course, to get a Corbyn government elected in the first place. But more than that, it's going to require more than simply a good election campaign or a brilliant manifesto or a lot of people treading the streets and giving out election material. Because the stakes are so great, we are engaged in a huge society-wide struggle. On their side, they know this. They will use every economic tool, every ideological tool, the whole of the press. We know what they will do. So we have to think on our side of the equation, where does our strength lie? Now, the Labour Party, is true, is larger now than it's ever been, the largest party of its kind in Europe. 500, 600,000 members. But the trade union movement in this country is 6 or 7 million members. The working class as a whole in this country is perhaps 40 million people in this country. And if they throw everything they have at us, we have to think, how is it that we can marshal all the forces, the Labour Party, the unions, the anti-war movement, the anti-austerity movement, every campaign against racism, to coordinate and defend and gain things from them which make it impossible for them to roll back the only socialist project that I've seen in my lifetime that stands a chance of transforming this society. And so I say to you now, yes, we have to get Jeremy Corbyn elected, but we have to strengthen the trade unions. The battle to unionize the fast food industry is not just right in itself, it's a step on the road to a socialist transformation in this country. The battle that Mark Serwotka talked about, that the civil servants have been involved in, and they'll be balloting for strike action again, that the post office workers have been involved in. Strengthening those unions, recruiting people to those unions. That's part of this project. The anti-war movement, the campaign against nuclear disarmament, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, the People's Assembly against austerity. These are issues which dig deep into the lives of ordinary working people in this country, that mobilize them and inspire them and organize them, and that is part of the broadest possible project of creating a socialist movement and not just allowing a socialist government to be isolated by our opponents. So what I say to you tonight is broaden your conception of what's necessary to win. Think in the long term, think of the big picture, and think of the breadth of the movement. Recruit to the unions, recruit to the campaigns, and build a movement which their side will be fearful of and cannot defeat. That's the project in front of us now. And you know, we need to hurry. We've had now more than a generation of neoliberal economics, more than a generation of cuts to the welfare state, more than 10 years now of austerity. And the truth of the matter is, before the social fabric had worn thin, but now there are gaping holes opening up in the most essential provision for working people, in the schools, in the hospitals, a broken prison system, a disastrously ruined national rail network, homelessness at record levels, an endemic housing crisis. We simply cannot, working people simply cannot go on living like this. We have to tear this government down in short order. It's a shambles, it's a disgrace. It can't even carry out its own policy on Europe effectively. Look at the mess that that government is. It deserves to go, and it deserves to go quickly. So we have to redouble our efforts. We may be, I don't think this is an exaggeration, it's not rhetoric to say, we are perhaps the last generation that can stop the decay of the welfare state before the damage becomes irreparable. You know, I was a child of the welfare state. I was the first person in my family to be born in an NHS hospital. I was the first person in my family to come home to a publicly owned council house. I was the first person in my family to be treated free at the point of need by the National Health Service. The first person in my family to go to university and to have my fees and my grant paid by the state. My parents thought that I was the first lucky generation. But by the end of their lives, they knew that we were the only lucky generation, and that kids growing up in working class families today cannot put their hand on their heart and say that I know that tomorrow my children will have a better house, a better job, will be better cared for if they're ill, will be better educated than the last generation. That simply isn't true any longer. And that can't be allowed to stand. We cannot be the generation that looks our children in the eyes and says we let it slip away. We had the chance of a generation, of more than one generation, to turn it back, to defeat those people. We had the best and biggest socialist movement that this country has seen in a generation, and we let it slip by. So my message to you tonight is, prepare to fight on a scale and with an intensity that we haven't fought since the 1970s. Get into the unions and recruit to the unions. If you're not a member of the Stop the War Coalition, join it. If you're not a member of the People's Assembly Against Austerity, join it. If you're not in the PSC or the CND, join it. Because it is a movement that will break this government. It is a movement which will build a socialist alternative. It's a movement that can defend a Corbyn government. That's what's at stake. Don't miss the opportunity. Don't waste the opportunity. Organise, educate, and struggle, and we can win. Thank you very much.